Good morning, everyone. I was thinking about a story from Autobiography of a Yogi that shares a beautiful lesson with us, though there are countless stories. Every story shares a beautiful lesson. I was thinking about the story when Mukunda, who is Paramhansa Yogananda, that was the name that he was given at birth and his name when he was younger. Mukunda feels that he wants God realization and that he must go to the Himalayan mountains, the Himalayas, in order to find God realization. He wants to be meditating with the yogis and the saints that are in the Himalayan mountains. And against his guru's desires or against his guru's counsel, he runs off to the Himalayas and spends time there. While he's there, he meets a saint from whom he asks for this experience of cosmic love. And the saint tells him that the experience of cosmic love will come from his guru, that he should return back to Sirampur, to Sri Yukteswar's ashram, and that he should be with his guru. So he leaves the Himalayan mountains, comes back down into the ashram, into the urban world, which I think about now is actually a fitting lesson for this series on urban renunciation, but not the point that I want to make, or not the lesson I want to share. But he comes back home and he lays at his guru's feet and he apologizes for leaving against his counsel. And he says to his guru, Sri Yukteswar, "You must be angry with me." And Sri Yukteswar's response is, "Wrath springs only from thwarted desires." He goes on to say to Mukunda, to Yogananda, that he had no expectations of him, so how could he be angry? He had no expectations of his actions, so he couldn't be upset with Mukunda. He couldn't be angry with Mukunda for leaving. The last thing that he says to him is, "I am happy only in your own true happiness." I was thinking about this line and what it means to have that experience. I'll go on and share the experience that Mukunda has with him, with his guru after this moment. But to stop first and reflect on what Sri Yukteswar means when he says, "I have no expectations of you." Is he demeaning Yogananda or Mukunda in this moment? I have no expectations of you, so how could I be angry? Of course not. Sri Yukteswar knows exactly who Mukunda is. He knows that he will grow into being the soul that is Yogananda. Both of these beings are perfect souls united in God consciousness. And he knows all that Yogananda is going to accomplish in his life. Is he saying, "I have no expectations of others," in a pessimistic, a passive attitude towards the world? Again, of course not. These great masters are brimming with dynamic energy. Passivity is not even a part of their consciousness. It's not a passive, pessimistic outlook of the world. Well, what can the world offer? Let me just not expect anything and sit back. Of course not. These gurus are dynamically and actively and consciously aware and awake and engaged in the world. So what is it that allowed Sri Yukteswar in this moment to say, "I have no expectation of you. I cannot be angry with you. My happiness lies only in your own true happiness"? It's the power of divine love. Yogananda goes on to describe the rest of that experience by sharing this power of dynamic love, this ability, this capacity to love freely and completely. He goes on to describe how he looks into his guru's eyes in this moment, and both of their eyes are filled with tears. And he says, "Up until this point, I've had a vague understanding of divine love, but you have concretely given me an experience of your angelic self." And the last thing that he says as he's describing this moment is he says that from this experience, he was able to understand the incompressible reaches of cosmic love. Just to sit with that and contemplate what that means, the incompressible reaches of cosmic love. Sri Yukteswar can walk through the world unattached to the outcomes of events, unattached to the desires or expectations that he has of Mukunda, of his other disciples, of everyone in the world, because he's living in that experience of the incompressible reaches of cosmic love. And we too, just as Christ tells us, I come here not to show you how great I can be, but how great you can become. We have that endless capacity of love within us. We have that ability to overcome the thwarting cross-currents of ego and to choose love in any moment. Because of course, what is it that keeps us bound to expectation in our lives? What is it that keeps us constantly hungry for something else? It's the desire to have everything fit just right in each moment. I was thinking about it yesterday. We have cool nights here in Palo Alto. We have cool nights, and then it's been slowly getting warmer throughout the day. And I woke up yesterday and was doing some work early in the morning, and I was cold, and so I put a blanket on, and that wasn't quite working, and I grabbed my tea, and that wasn't quite working, and so I have a little space heater, and I set up my space heater right in front of me and was finally feeling warmed up and was working. And then about 12 hours later, about 10 hours later, by about 4 o'clock, 4:30 that afternoon, it was about 85 degrees, and I was hot, and I was putting the space heater away and trying to find the fan and trying to create the circumstances in my life that would be just right to keep me content. And it was a perfect example. It stopped me in my tracks for a moment to think, just 10 hours ago, I was settling in and trying to find a way to stay warm. Now I'm trying to find a way to be cool. What are my expectations in all of this? What would happen if the fan wasn't working, or if the tea wasn't doing what I wanted it to do? I had so many expectations engaged in this process, but I was aware of how fleeting they were. Just in the span of a day, everything that I'd needed and expected and wanted in the morning, everything that I desired, it was completely gone. It was a dream. Because now I needed, in this case, the power of it is the juxtaposition, the contrast. I needed the exact opposite of that. I was hot and I wanted to be cooled off versus being cold and wanting to be warmed up. But it was so powerful, just how fragile these threads are that keep us bound to the desires and expectations that we have in the world. And just one little snip, and they're gone. And that tether is released, and our soul can lift itself a little bit higher, awaken itself a little bit more completely, and uplift the consciousness just one snip after another. And how do we do that? What does that look like? It looks like moving through the world, as Sri Yukteswar tells us, reaching out for that incompressible, the incompressible reaches of cosmic love. I was watching a documentary earlier this week, which was a really beautiful story. It's called Far from the Tree. And it was about, the story is, there's a writer, he's a writer and a journalist, and due to circumstances in his life, he wasn't accepted by his family, and his parents rejected him and kicked him out of his home. And so as he grew up and in his professional life, he decided to embark on a journey of trying to understand how families with children who didn't meet the societal definition of normal reacted to those shattered expectations, because his experience in his life was that he didn't meet the expectations of his family, and his family rejected him and pushed him away. So he went about exploring this in a number of different families and circumstances. And one of the stories that he follows is a family of a boy who has autism. And for the first 12 years, 10 or 11 or 12 years, somewhere around there, of this young boy's life, he's completely nonverbal, still is nonverbal, at the time that the documentary is made, but he's completely nonverbal, and his family never has an opportunity. They have no way to communicate with him. So what they see are only the outer expressions of his reality, which with this disorder, with autism, often is, bodily spasms, tantrums, and things like that. And so the family, they're just moving around the world. They're moving around this being and this soul, doing what they can to take care of him, to care for him, and to do their best to support him, but not really ever knowing what he needs and what his expectations are. And then one day they visit a woman who has created a new technique to help people with this disorder to communicate, and they use a tablet and a specialized alphabet in order to communicate. And the family spends a week with this woman and this young boy, and just the painstaking process of learning and repeating over and over again and trying to understand how to communicate in this new way. And there's one day where the boy is having a pretty severe tantrum. It lasts, I believe, if I'm recalling correctly, 90 minutes, if not longer, just really in the midst of a struggle and a tantrum. But the teacher keeps working with him and says, tell us what's going on, tell us how you're feeling, communicate with us. And over the course of this 90 minutes or longer that the young boy is really trying to communicate, but also in the midst of this tantrum, he spells out the words, I'm trying, or he spells out, the words, I'm trying, this is really hard, but I'm very smart. And everything, in the cinematic description of this, everything in the documentary just stops, and you can see they're actually filming the process. You can see his parents over in the corner, just overwhelmed with joy. It gets me a little, it touches my heart so deeply, because this is the first time that his parents are ever able to communicate with him and to hear about his interior world and to begin to develop a relationship that has a stronger sense of what we would consider in society's definition to be normalcy. And just to finish that thought, this young boy, he's saying, I'm really smart. He goes on in the rest of the documentary, he's extremely articulate. At one point, again, he's not speaking, he's using a tablet to spell out and to communicate. But at one point in an interview, he's asked, what does it feel like to have autism? And what does it feel like to be in your body? And he says it feels like being a tiger in a cage. Again, just to express to you how articulate and how aware and conscious this boy was, even though his body wouldn't allow him to express it in those normal ways. But to come back to that moment in the story that I was describing, I was struck by all of the joy and the compassion and the gratitude that his parents felt in that moment, the first time they were really able to hear his words and hear him speaking and communicating in this way. And it was so powerful. But as I stopped and watched a little bit more, and I could see their reaction and their joy in that moment, but what I noticed from that moment and the rest of the documentary on is that even though there was now joy and gratitude and just gratefulness for this experience and for this ability to communicate, the relationship of love never changed. The relationship of how they loved their son, how they supported their son, what they cared for in their son, it wasn't circumstantial. It didn't change the moment that they were able to communicate with them. All of that love was still there. And it's such an important lesson for us to remember in our lives. Love is not something that we apply or that we fit in like a puzzle piece when circumstances and situations are difficult. Love is inherent in every single moment. The incompressible reaches of cosmic love are present in every single moment. And we have that ability to rise above the thwarting cross-currents of our expectations, the thwarting cross-currents of ego, and to choose that love, to choose those moments. The world, for all of us, is complicated. We have so many responsibilities, we have so many obligations, we have relationships that we're forming, relationships that we're maintaining. And throughout the course of that, there are so many things that we go through the day expecting and wanting. But again, we have an opportunity to rise above all of those needs and desires by choosing love in each moment, by looking for it. Because the truth is that love is so much stronger than any disappointment, any fleeting desires. As I was saying with that story that I shared about yesterday, in the morning feeling cold and having all of these desires and needs to be warm, and then in the afternoon being warm and having all these desires and needs to feel cold, that's a simple example. It's trivial. It passes with the sun rising higher in the sky. But just because it's simple doesn't mean that it can't be applied to every other circumstance in our life. to the children that we're raising and the expectations that we have, to the job that we're performing and the desires and the needs that we feel we have, to the house that we want to live in, to the circumstances of our lives. Here we are in April or May now of 2020, where for many of us, our expectations have been squandered, of how we are expecting to move through the world, of what our habits have created, and those patterns of thoughts and desires that are there. But love is inherent in the midst of every circumstance. God is present in the midst of every circumstance. And by simply acknowledging and choosing that reality that love is stronger than the disappointment, we can move step by step, incrementally, closer to soul freedom. On Wednesday, a few days ago, it's Friday morning now, so 2 days ago, I was taking a walk through my neighborhood here in Palo Alto, and I came to a park. So I was just walking through, I had my face mask on and my hat on. I was a little bit incognito and just observing everything that was happening around me, observing, the kids that were playing in the front yard and coloring in chalk with their parents, or, there was a young mother who was with her daughter in the stroller pointing to the trees and the birds, just all of these really sweet moments of love and friendship and compassion. And I came to a park, which is creates a natural loop for me to turn around and head back to my house. And when I got to the park, which I've been to many times since this shelter-in-place has started, I just was looking at it with a different lens, and I could see all of the caution tape that was closing off, that was blocking off the play structure where the swings and the slides and the benches and everything are. And it struck me, it's still a little bit otherworldly. I still feel like I'm in a movie when I'm seeing things like that. You don't ever really think that that's going to be part of your reality. But here it was, this deserted park where there were a few other people walking the perimeter along with me, but nobody engaged in the swings and playing on all of the little toys and things like that were in the park. And because it struck me for a moment, I just stopped and was looking at the park, and I recognized that this feeling, what I could feel as I was looking at the play structure and the baseball field and all of the different little elements that are present in the park, it was a visceral memory. I could feel the joy. I could almost hear the laughter of the children playing on the swings and of the older kids running through the baseball fields. I could feel and experience that joy and that play and that laughter. And I don't say that in a fantastical way. It's not meant to be fantastical. It was an experience that roots us right back in this conversation of how to choose love and where to find love, and how to use love to use the power of love to overcome our thwarted desires and our suppressed expectations, our shattered expectations. Because what I realized in that moment here, where there's this deserted park, where all of the expectation of wanting to be out playing could so potentially be sitting heavily there. So many people who are literally roped off from play with this caution tape. And what I could experience and what I felt was laughter and play and love. And it brings us right back to that place where we can know for certain the imprint of love is so much stronger than the imprint of disappointment. Disappointment, though it feels so intense for us when we're experiencing it, it's circumstantial. It's the thinnest of threads that's tethering us, that's tying us back down to this ego consciousness. When our soul wants to live and knows how to live in freedom, in perfect joy, in love. And it's simply by choosing it, by looking for it, by consciously engaging in that aspect of love in every moment, in always coming back to a place of, just like Sri Yukteswar tells us, not having expectations. It doesn't mean we're passive. It doesn't mean we're pessimistic. It doesn't mean we're writing off the rest of the world and building a wall around ourselves. Well, I'll have no expectations, then nothing can touch me. It's exactly the opposite. It's leaning into the divine consciousness which is present in every person, every moment, every circumstance. if we have faith that that imprint of love, that that divine consciousness is resounding so much more strongly than any of our egoic desires and any of our thwarted desires or shattered expectations, then we can live step by step so much closer to that feeling of being able to look into our Guru's eyes, as Mukunda did when he returned from the Himalayas, see the tears shining in both of their eyes, and to say, I know an experience concretely of divine love. We can experience and we can feel and we can share that the incompressible reaches of cosmic love with everyone we meet, with everyone we touch, with everything that we experience in our lives.